of how to, because that's, you know, when I was getting ready to do my first talk, I was like all over the place, like
Yeah.
how much the story, you get so caught up in it that you
Yeah,
forget
yeah.
who you're delivering to and that whole point. So
Mhm.
if you could give us a few more pointers on how to break it down, how we're constructing our signature talk.
Sure.
Like, do you start with the title? Do you start with?
Yes, Pete, I have you, thank you.
Oh, there we go, great. So, did you catch the question?
Yeah. Yes,
All
we
right.
did.
So, I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity to try something really brand new. I'm going to try to do a little mini workshop keynote based
Great.
on that.
Yeah.
So in my head right now, what I'm doing is I'm structuring a lot of the things that I already know. I've got a presentation coming up in 3 weeks that I really haven't started on. That's all about how do you develop your story as a retailer. Okay, stores tell stories just like people do. We're going to the environment, the whole thing. There's the sales staff and the electronics and the merchandise and all that kind of stuff. So here's what I'm going to, let me just have a second to put my thoughts together. All right, some people are in the business of speaking because they're doing their own therapy. Have you seen speakers like that? Okay, they're just going through it. A lot of people who do comedy are in therapy. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, they're just working out life, and their life is their art form in a sense. They share it with everybody. It's so important. The most important thing I think you can do, because we live in a world where there's so much change and there's a need for so many messages and we have so many potential speakers, is to make sure that you know what your audience's unmet needs are. That's where your market is. If you're trying to be a Zig Ziglar or a Waldo Waldman or anybody else that's already in existence, you can't be them. The phrase that I'm stealing from someone I don't know is they're already taken. You can't be another person, you have to be yourself. So it's a mix of the situation and the world that you live in right now, who you are, what people need to know, what people need to feel, what people need to do, and then how you can be an interpreter and a catalyst for that. From a planning perspective, I encourage you to play the role of catalyst, not performer. Have you seen speakers who are like all about themselves? They step up on there and they're so glad to be in front of an audience. And it's all about them. And you just want to puke. And at the end of the presentation, you didn't get a lot of value out of it. Some people even laugh at folks that are like that. The world today, in my opinion, is looking for a lot more authenticity, a lot more value. And you have to go through the hard work of creating that value before you can deliver it. There's a lot of talk in the popular press right now, oh, you've got to be an expert, you've got to be an expert. I even saw a course online that said how to be an expert for $29.95. You know, it takes a lifetime to become a really good doctor or a great coach or whatever. You have to be on all the time. So here's the thing. You have to understand your audience. There are two things you can do to understand your audience. One is to be curious, and two is to talk to them. Don't talk about yourself. Don't start off by saying, I want to do this, I want to talk about that, I'm looking for this audience. Just ask them what they need, and then ask why. What would that get you? If you have a need, why do you have that need? That tells you a little bit about their motivation and what happened just before. That gives you all the context you need for the speech. And then you ask them, what will that get you? If you don't know what your audience is going to do with the information, the insights, the inspiration that you give them, you can't develop material as well as you can't develop the material as well. Right, so that's the first thing. You really need to get to know your audience. The second thing that you need to do, in my opinion, and this doesn't happen second, it happens throughout the whole process, is you need a reason for being for your presentation. Why does your presentation exist? Not you as a person. We're not talking about personal validation. But my presentation or Caveman Management 101 or whatever it's called exists so that blank, and the first blank is identify your audience, can achieve blank. their most desired outcome, i.e. the unmet needs that you learned about from interviewing them. In the startup world, the number is 50 to 100 customers that you have to talk to before you do your business plan, before you start writing code, before you start looking for money. Nobody wants to invest in something that doesn't have a proven market need. Why would you spend hundreds of hours of your time on a keynote presentation that will define your future from today forward unless you know for sure it's going to hit? We're back to the idea, just to kind of ground it, that it's not about you. It's about you being a catalyst and giving something to your audience. Samantha, you're going to be giving your employees and your team, all of the whole organization, you said 100 people or whatever, 400 or whatever.
They won't be there, but yeah. It'll be on DISC, the talent assessment.
You're going to be giving them the things that they need to succeed. That's not the Samantha show. Okay. So first thing you need is to understand your audience. The second thing is your reason for being. The third thing, very important as well, you need to know what your governing principles are. Your governing principles are your rules of the road for being and doing. For example, I started a digital agency with a colleague in the early 1990s, and one of our principles is we would never work with companies that by design do harm to others. And we actually had a guy show up with a suitcase of money, and he wanted us to do porn sites, and we looked at each other, and it took 1/10 of a second, we said no. I felt really good about that. I might have a nicer car today, but my heart's intact. So your governing principles are the very small set of rules that make you work well in the world. The things that you don't want to break. You're inviolable. And what's the word?
Inviolable.
Yeah, your absolute must always never break them rules.
Yeah.
And they're a combination of what the world needs and what you can do. So for example, I could never have a principle of being a principal ballerina because I can't do that. That's not in me. Okay? I couldn't do something around speaking Urdu or Mandarin because I don't know that. That's not authentic from me. Now your principles are next. The third thing, this one takes other people to help you.
Wouldn't that be number
That's
4?
I'm sorry, number 4, sorry, number 4. Yeah, you gotta learn how to count too. That's
Yeah.
The next one is what kind of emotional connection is your talk going to make? What's the emotional outcome that you're looking for? Remember, Samantha talked about tears. A couple of other people talked about very strong emotions that they were having. You can design the emotions that you want to convey. Now, we're not talking about manipulating people. This is not Cambridge Analytica. It's not about telling a story to make people cry just for the sake of making them cry. You have to say, make them laugh, make them cry.
Yeah.
To me, that's manipulative unless it's on purpose for your audience and it's with meaning. So for story miners, when we're doing customer experience work, we try to connect and build experiences that help people feel at first understood. How can you have a good consulting experience unless you feel listened to? Okay? At the very end, we help people to feel transformed. They're more capable, they have a better understanding of the future, they're more confident, they're better leaders, etc. So come up with 3, no more than 4, like a little emotional journey. It'll help you to figure out, like Mike, which way to tell your story, which emotion to hit and when, because you have a target in your mind. It's not so much a formula that you follow, it's just a framework, it's some guidelines for what you're doing. The next one...
Just articulate the principle there.
Oh, the principles?
What was number 4?
What kind of emotional connection you want to convey?
Oh, I would call those emotional outcomes. You know, what are the emotions that you are consistently going to tune your presentation to? It's not like the emotion you're trying to get out of somebody. It's more about how you're going to connect with them. You're going to resonate on these 3 or 4 emotions. I saw somebody look at their watch, so we're going to wrap up real quick.
Yeah, Mike, we have to be out by 1:30, my understanding is, so if you can wrap up in a couple minutes. I have,
1:25,
yes.
Okay, good. We'll do it. We'll do it.
Thank you.
The next is to design your experience. Call it experience design. What is the audience experience, the client experience, the attendee experience? By the way, I love the word participant instead of attendee, and I usually call that out to my prospects and clients, because you can have a conversation about, well, you don't want them to just sit there. Don't you want them to practice? Don't you want them to play? Don't you want them to get involved and take something away? So what's the participant experience? I'll be happy to talk about that at length at another time. That's the core of what we do at Story-Myers. The last thing is, well, there are several other parts, but for our time, the most important one is your story. And I don't mean the story about your speech. I don't mean your content. But what is your story? You have to be able to tell your story so that other people can tell your story. And there are two ways to do it. One of them is to be able to write it down. You should all have a written bio and a spoken bio, and use each other to kind of check it out. And when you're doing it, don't go by your personal preferences. Play a role. Like, I'm a business buyer, I'm an HR, I'm a training person, I need 20 people for this event, my concerns are blah, blah, blah. Check it against that. Don't just go with personal feelings.
Is the written and the audio bios are the same, or
No,
they have to be different?
No, they're so different. When you go to somebody's website and read the bio and then stand up here and read it, oh my God, it's so boring. It's just got to be. It's got to be shorter. It's got to match the person who's delivering it, etc.
Okay.
The most important thing I can share with you about life in general is a lesson I've learned like 100 times, and it's what I sell to my clients all the time. The very best story about you comes from
Your mama.
I'm going to retire. That's a better answer.
Mine.
That's good.
Yes. The experience that you give other people is what gives rise to the stories about you. So this construct that I'm about to spill my water for the second time, might as well
We're gonna
just
be
do it
used to
right
it.
now.
Sippy cup.
So all these things that I've told you, which sound really deep and like, why do I have to do all of that? Is because that's what gives rise to you delivering a great experience. An experience is what people want. They don't just want your words. They don't just want your thoughts. They don't just want to touch you. They don't just want your connection. They want everything. And how you deliver that is through this construct that we've shared. This is how you work out your story. It's your story workout, if you will. So the experience that you give others becomes a story. And the better your experience is, the better the stories are told about you. And here's the clincher. This is true for your presentations, for your marketing, and everything. People like to discover more than they like to be told. If you focus only on your story, you're tell, push, 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 and people don't like it as much. They're told stuff all the time. But as human beings, we're wired for stories, ever since we're kids. Grandparents, school, libraries, movies, films, rap songs, it's all story, and it's all about how people move from one place to another in their life. It's all hero's journey stuff, okay? So, all of that said,
Wow.
you work on these things. We can talk about it again if you like, but this will give your audience a chance to feel who you are. You'll be authentic. You'll be able to deliver a higher value because you're giving an experience, not just a speech. So this is how you architect an experience, and it's how you work out your story.
Thank you.